What the hell are you doing? The HOA president's daughter just laughed as she stole my ATV. My mom runs this neighborhood. I'm untouchable. She had no idea what she'd just started. There she was in my driveway, hooking my four-wheeler to her boyfriend's trailer like she owned the place. The metallic clank of chains securing my property. Sarah's last gift before cancer took her made my blood boil. You can't just steal my property. Watch me, she finished with a sharp snap. What are you gonna do, call the cops? I watched my last connection to my dead wife get dragged away, but stealing from the wrong person can expose secrets that bring 37 federal agents to your door. What would you do if the HOA Karen's kid stole your ATV and claimed she was untouchable? Drop your battle plan in the comments. Shout out where you're watching from. She thought she was untouchable. She was dead wrong. My name's Marcus Webb, and if you'd told me 3 years ago that I'd be taking down a criminal empire, I would have laughed in your face. I'm just a 52-year-old electrician who wanted to live quietly after my wife Sarah passed from cancer. We'd moved to Pinewood Estates, this middle-class suburb outside Austin, because Sarah fell in love with the big backyards and the promise of community living. The smell of cedar shavings and WD-40 still fills my garage workshop, where I spend most evenings now, building birdhouses and fixing neighbors' broken appliances. It keeps my hands busy and my mind off the empty house. But the real treasure sits right there in my driveway, a 2019 Polaris Sportsman ATV that Sarah surprised me with for our 25th anniversary, just 2 months before her diagnosis. Promise me you'll still take those weekend trail rides, she'd said, her hand weak but determined as she pressed the keys into my palm. Don't let my leaving stop you from living. So yeah, that ATV isn't just some toy, it's my last piece of her. Pinewood Estates seemed perfect at first. 47 modest homes with reasonable HOA dues of $180 a month. Then I met Brenda Hutchinson, and suddenly those dues started making a lot less sense. Picture every HOA horror story you've ever heard, then multiply it by 10. Brenda's 49, perfectly manicured, and carries her oversized Michael Kors purse like it's loaded with ammunition. She's been HOA president for 3 years running, not because she's popular, but because she's systematically bullied every opponent into withdrawal. Her husband Rick travels constantly for some pharmaceutical company, leaving Brenda to run the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. The constant drone of overpriced lawn crews fills the air crews owned by her brother-in-law, charging $800 a month when the job's worth $300. Last month, she fined the Johnsons $150 because their mailbox was hunter green instead of forest green. I'm not kidding. She brought paint samples to prove it. Their daughter Kaylee is 19, a community college dropout who treats our streets like her racetrack. I'd watched her peel out in different cars, leaving the acrid smell of burnt rubber hanging in the summer heat while her sketchy boyfriends laughed from the passenger seats. But I didn't understand the full scope of Brenda's tyranny until I got my first violation notice. I walked out to grab my mail and found a bright yellow citation taped to my door. Unauthorized recreational vehicle storage, $200 fine. My ATV sat exactly where it had been since move-in day, in my own driveway. That evening, I attended my first HOA meeting in the community center, a stuffy room reeking of industrial carpet cleaner and broken dreams. About 15 neighbors showed up, most looking like beaten dogs. Mr. Webb, Brenda announced when I raised my hand, your recreational vehicle violates our evolving community standards. I pulled out my covenant documents. There's no mention of ATV restrictions anywhere in here. The room went dead silent, except for the rattling air conditioner overhead. I watched neighbors avoid eye contact clearly. I wasn't the first person to challenge Queen Brenda. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes went ice cold. Rules evolve, Mr. Webb. We maintain property values through adaptive governance. If you can't keep up, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you. That's when I noticed Harold Chen, the elderly accountant 2 streets over, frantically scribbling notes. Rita Gonzalez, who'd quit as treasurer 6 months earlier, was shaking her head in disgust. Sitting in that fluorescent-lit room watching Brenda's predatory smile, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't backing down, and neither was my ATV. Saturday morning, 2 weeks after that disastrous HOA meeting. I was heading back from Home Depot with supplies for a new workbench when I turned onto my street and saw something that made my blood freeze. Kaylee Hutchinson was in my driveway, hooking my ATV to a beat-up trailer behind some punk's pickup truck. I slammed on the brakes so hard my lumber slid forward in the truck bed with a crash that echoed down the street. The sound of metal chains clanking as she secured my property Sarah's last gift sent rage shooting through my veins like electricity. "What the hell are you doing?" Kaylee looked up from the trailer hitch, her bleached hair catching the morning sun, and actually laughed. "Oh, hey, it's the complainer. Just removing this eyesore like Mom said." "That's my property. You can't just steal my ATV." "Steal." She stood up, dusting off her hands with theatrical innocence. "Mom says it's illegally parked. We're just helping you comply with community standards." The boyfriend, a skinny kid with neck tattoos and dead eyes, never looked up from his phone. But I caught the bulge under his jacket and realized this wasn't some teenage prank. This had the feel of organized intimidation. "You have exactly 10 seconds to unhook that trailer before I call the police." Kaylee's laugh was like fingernails on glass. "Go ahead, old man. Mom already cleared this with Officer Davidson. He knows all about your difficulties adjusting to neighborhood rules." I pulled out my phone anyway and dialed 911. 45 minutes later, 45 minutes of watching my ATV disappear down the street while neighbors peered through curtains like they were watching reality TV. Officer Davidson finally arrived. His patrol car crunched over the gravel in my driveway, and I noticed how he took his sweet time getting out. "Mr. Webb? Got a report about a property dispute." "Dispute? That girl just stole my four-wheeler in broad daylight." Davidson was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of mustache that screamed, trying too hard to look authoritative. He flipped open his notepad with obvious reluctance. "Well, let's see what we can figure out." 20 minutes of back and forth got me nowhere. No witnesses willing to talk, no proof of ownership on me. Kaylee's story that I'd said she could borrow it versus my word. Davidson's hands were tied, he explained, without clear evidence of theft. That's when Brenda's white Mercedes pulled up like cavalry arriving for the wrong side. The overpowering smell of vanilla perfume mixed with hot asphalt as she stepped out, wearing a tennis outfit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her smile was pure poison wrapped in suburban sweetness. "Officer Davidson? Thank you so much for responding quickly." She air-kissed him like they were old friends. "I'm afraid Mr. Webb has been having some difficulties with our community guidelines." She produced a manila folder from her oversized purse, because of course she came prepared. "This is the Covenant Amendment regarding recreational vehicles, filed just last week. All residents were notified by email. I never got any email." But Davidson was already nodding like this made perfect sense. "Mrs. Hutchinson's been very patient," the officer said, clearly eager to wrap this up and get back to real police work. "Maybe you could work something out privately?" "Of course," Brenda purred. "We're all neighbors here." After Davidson left, Brenda's mask slipped completely. "You have 72 hours to remove that vehicle from community property, Mr. Webb. Next time we won't be so accommodating." "It was in my driveway. Your driveway extends only to the property line. Everything beyond that sidewalk crack belongs to the HOA. Her finger pointed to an invisible line I'd never noticed. "Read your deed restrictions more carefully." That night, I drove to the county courthouse and spent 3 hours in the dusty records office. See, years of rewiring houses had taught me that when electrical systems don't add up, you follow the circuit back to the source. Same principle applied here, and Brenda's story was full of shorts. First discovery. Her recreational vehicle amendment was never officially filed. She'd produced fake paperwork for the cop. I remembered reading in my original HOA documents that Texas property code requires 30 days written notice for any covenant changes, plus a majority vote of homeowners. Brenda had done neither. But here's what really caught my attention in those filing records. The HOA's landscaping contractor wasn't Rick's brother-in-law like everyone assumed. It was Rick himself, using a shell company called Hutchinson Services, LLC, to funnel HOA money into his own pocket. The invoices were right there in black and white, billing $800 monthly for services that any legitimate company would charge $300 for. Sunday morning, I set up my phone and filmed myself moving the ATV back into my driveway. Posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group with a simple caption. "Interesting how rules appear overnight without proper votes or official filing." 23 supportive comments appeared within an hour. Mrs. Patterson from Oak Street said she'd been fighting bogus fines for months. Harold Chen mentioned irregularities in the financial reports that don't add up. Then, suddenly, I couldn't access the group anymore. "Administrator privileges," the error message said. But the damage was done. Neighbors were talking and cracks were showing in Brenda's perfect facade. That afternoon, I found an anonymous note tucked under my windshield wiper. Drop this, or things get much worse. The handwriting looked suspiciously like the HOA meeting minutes I'd seen Brenda scribbling. I folded the note carefully and smiled. If they thought one stolen ATV would break me, they had no idea what they were dealing with. The harassment campaign started exactly 72 hours after my Facebook post. Like Brenda had it scheduled with little reminder alerts. Monday morning brought the first gift: excessive grass height, $150 fine. I walked outside with my coffee, steam rising in the cool air, and stared at my lawn. I'd mowed it 3 days ago. The grass was 2.5 inches tall, perfectly normal for Texas summer. But this was just the opening shot in Brenda's shock and awe campaign. Over 2 weeks, violation notices appeared like clockwork. Mailbox color violation, $100 fine for hunter green that matched every third house. Excessive noise during quiet hours, $200 fine for using my table saw at 2 p.m. Wednesday. Apparently Brenda's quiet hours included mid-afternoon. My favorite was unauthorized signage, $75 fine for my house numbers. The same brass numbers identical to everyone else's. I guess Brenda thought I was running some underground numbering rebellion. The smell of fresh citation paper became as familiar as my morning coffee. Each fine was signed with Brenda's perfect cursive, like she was autographing my misery. But here's where Brenda made her first real mistake. She got greedy and sloppy. I started documenting everything with photos and timestamps. My neighbor, Harold Chen, the retired accountant, wandered over during one evidence session, clutching green tea. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to do municipal contract work. Those fines violate city ordinances." Harold's eyes twinkled behind thick glasses. "Austin Municipal Code limits HOA fines to actual damages. That grass violation, maximum penalty is $25, not $150. She's running her own casino with made-up rules." That evening, I dove into Austin's municipal code like studying for the bar exam. Harold was right. Brenda was pulling numbers from thin air. Texas Property Code Section 209.006 requires HOA fines to be reasonable and proportionate. Charging $200 for afternoon woodworking wasn't just unreasonable, it was legally laughable. Meanwhile, Brenda's intimidation escalated beyond paperwork terrorism. She started driving by 4 or 5 times daily in that white Mercedes, making her surveillance obvious. The soft purr of German engineering became my irritation soundtrack. Worse, she'd park across the street with a telephoto camera, photographing my property like I was running a meth lab instead of building birdhouses. The metallic click, click, click echoed across the quiet street, especially grating during morning coffee. Then came the neighborhood loyalty program. Brenda started buying allies with HOA fee reductions, a reverse protection racket where good behavior got rewarded. The Hendersons got monthly dues cut in half after Mrs. Henderson started leaving passive-aggressive notes about my declining property standards. But not everyone was for sale. Rita Gonzalez, the former treasurer, knocked on my door Thursday evening with a manila envelope clutched like state secrets. "I've been watching this circus," she said, nervously checking over her shoulder. "You need to see what I kept when I quit." Inside were photocopies of financial records from her tenure as treasurer. The numbers painted a disturbing picture. Pool maintenance, $800 monthly for a community pool that legitimate companies would service for $300. Security patrol, $400 monthly for one guy making 2 lazy neighborhood drives weekly. Administrative fees, $200 monthly with 0 documentation. "I started questioning these expenses last winter," Rita explained, voice tight with frustration. "Brenda said I was exceeding my authority as treasurer and pressured me to resign before I could dig deeper." As I studied the paperwork under my kitchen light, the musty smell of old documents mixing with Rita's stress smoking, I realized this wasn't simple HOA power tripping. This was organized theft disguised as community management. Friday morning brought Brenda's most brazen move. I found Kaylee spray painting SNITCH across my garage door in bright red letters. The angry rattle of aerosol and her delighted giggling as she bolted were captured in perfect high definition by my security cameras. Finally, smoking gun evidence even Officer Davidson couldn't ignore. He showed up an hour later, watched the crystal clear footage, and actually seemed interested. "That's definitely criminal mischief," he admitted. Clear as day. But 20 minutes later, Brenda arrived with a lawyer, some slick downtown type who immediately started throwing around terms like potential digital manipulation. Even with Kaylee's face in 1080p glory, she walked away with nothing more than a warning and smug smile. That night, I sat in my workshop surrounded by familiar smells of sawdust and machine oil, studying Rita's damning financial records alongside my growing harassment citations. The pieces were forming a picture beyond petty neighborhood politics. This was about money, serious money, and people who'd gotten comfortable thinking they were above consequences. But they'd made one crucial miscalculation. They'd declared war on a widower with unlimited time, nothing left to lose, and growing evidence that their perfect scam was about to unravel. Rita's financial bombshell was just the appetizer. 3 days later, she introduced me to Harold Chen, the neighborhood's unofficial forensic accountant, who'd been quietly tracking HOA irregularities like a retired cop working a cold case. We met at Harold's house Tuesday evening, his dining room transformed into mission control. Spreadsheets and documentation covered every surface. The smell of jasmine tea mixed with musty financial records, like a library specializing in white-collar crime. "I've been an accountant for 43 years, Harold said, his arthritis-gnarled fingers dancing across calculator keys. "I've never seen bookkeeping this creatively corrupt. It's almost artistic." He spread out a color-coded timeline, red entries for questionable expenses, yellow for overcharges, blue for fabricated items. The pattern revealed systematic theft disguised as community management. "Pool chemical delivery, $400 monthly," Harold pointed to a red entry. I called the supplier. Actual cost is $89. "The difference gets funneled to Hutchinson Services, LLC. Rita leaned forward, stress-smoking. "Same scam with landscape maintenance. Rick's shell company charges $800 for work worth $300. The extra $500 gets laundered through fake equipment rental fees." But Harold's detective work uncovered something far more sinister. Cross-referencing inflated payments with Rick's travel schedule revealed perfect correlation. Every major discrepancy coincided with Rick's pharmaceutical conferences in Mexico. "Gentlemen," Harold said quietly, "we're not dealing with garden-variety HOA corruption. This is money laundering using our neighborhood association as a front." The pieces clicked together. Rick's frequent Mexico trips, Brenda's desperate need to control HOA finances, Kaylee's entitled lifestyle despite having no job. They weren't just stealing from neighbors, they were washing drug money through our monthly dues. Meanwhile, Brenda's retaliation became unhinged. She convinced the city inspector to show up, claiming I was doing illegal electrical work. Inspector Martinez spent 20 minutes examining my workshop. "Your work's cleaner than most licensed contractors," he told me. "Someone's filing false reports. That's actually a misdemeanor." After he left, I spotted Brenda's Mercedes parked at the corner, engine idling, thick black exhaust creating a toxic cloud. Suburban spy thriller surveillance. Then intimidation went physical. A white pickup with Pinewood security signs started parking outside my house for hours. The driver, a thick-necked gorilla, would sit there with diesel engine running, creating noxious fog that made my coffee taste like petroleum. I researched Pinewood security. No incorporation, no license, no insurance, no address. Just another Hutchinson money laundering vehicle billing the HOA for phantom services. The real game changer came when Kaylee's boyfriend, Jake Morrison, got arrested during a traffic stop. Cops found enough fentanyl to stock a pharmacy, plus $14,000 in cash. Facing federal charges, Jake became the world's most cooperative witness. His testimony, obtained through a courthouse contact who owed me for electrical work, revealed the full Hutchinson operation. Rick wasn't attending pharmaceutical conferences. He was importing illegal drugs through corrupt doctors and pain clinics, then using our HOA to launder profits. Every inflated contract, every phantom expense, dirty drug money getting scrubbed clean through our neighborhood association. Brenda's iron-fisted control wasn't about power trips. It was protecting a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. Harold's spreadsheet showed $73,000 in questionable expenses over 3 years. Jake's testimony suggested the real number approached $200,000, including cash payments that never hit official books. "Sweet mother of pearl," Rita whispered when I shared Jake's revelations. "We're not fighting some power-mad HOA president. We're up against a drug cartel using our monthly dues as their money laundry." That weekend, the Hutchinson family dropped all pretense. Someone shattered my workshop window and stole $1,200 worth of power tools. Security cameras captured everything, including Kaylee's distinctive butterfly tattoo as she stuffed my drill set into a garbage bag. But this time, I had a better option than Officer Davidson's reluctant investigation. Jake's arrest gave me federal jurisdiction. I called the DEA tip line. Agent Rodriguez returned my call within 2 hours. We met at a downtown Austin coffee shop, where she reviewed my evidence with focused intensity. "Mr. Webb," she said, studying Harold's analysis, "you've documented sophisticated money laundering. Combined with Morrison's cooperation, we have grounds for federal racketeering charges." She explained Rick's pharmaceutical company had been under federal surveillance for months, but they needed inside documentation for an airtight case. My evidence packet was exactly what they needed to move from investigation to prosecution. "Keep documenting everything," Rodriguez said, sliding her card across the table. "And watch your back. People laundering this kind of money don't hesitate to eliminate threats." That night, I installed motion sensors and relocated my remaining tools to a storage unit. The empty workshop smelled like motor oil and impending confrontation, because I finally understood what I was fighting. This wasn't about an ATV or HOA rules. This was about bringing down a drug trafficking operation hiding in plain sight, protected by suburban bureaucracy. And they were about to learn that messing with a widower's last connection to his dead wife was the biggest mistake they'd ever made. The breakthrough that blew this whole thing wide open came from Harold's compulsive need to alphabetize everything, a habit that drove his wife crazy but was about to expose the biggest money laundering scheme in our county's history. Thursday night, we were drowning in paperwork when Harold pulled out a folder marked Corporate Entities H2M with the pride of a magician, revealing his best trick. "I've been cross-referencing every business name in our HOA records," Harold said, cleaning his glasses. "And I found something that made my accountant brain start screaming." He spread out incorporation papers for Meridian Pharmaceutical Solutions, Rick's supposedly legitimate business empire. The documents looked official enough to fool a bank loan officer, complete with state filing stamps and embossed corporate seals. "But look at this business address," Harold pointed. "It's a UPS store mailbox in a strip mall between a nail salon and a payday loan place. What pharmaceutical company operates out of 20 square feet of rented mailbox space?" The smell of Harold's overworked printer mixing with his wife's cigarette smoke filled the room as he produced page after page of corporate records. "Here's where it gets interesting," Harold said, handing me FDA records. "Meridian Pharmaceutical Solutions has never been registered with the Food and Drug Administration. Never registered at all. No legitimate pharmaceutical company can operate without FDA oversight." The revelation hit me like cold water. Rick's entire business was a fabrication and elaborate prop designed to justify massive cash flows from sources that definitely weren't selling aspirin. Harold had traced the money through 3 layers of shell companies, like following breadcrumbs through a financial forest designed to confuse federal investigators. "Meridian Pharmaceutical receives consulting payments from unnamed Mexican entities," Harold explained. "Those funds transfer to Hutchinson Services LLC for equipment purchases. Then Hutchinson Services bills our HOA inflated amounts, effectively washing dirty money through our monthly dues." I stared at Harold's financial flowchart, complete with color-coded arrows showing money moving through corporate entities. This wasn't amateur-hour embezzlement. This was professional-grade money laundering that would impress federal prosecutors. Rita arrived just as Harold finished explaining how our neighborhood association had become an unwitting participant in international drug trafficking. She took one look at the corporate documents and immediately grasped the implications. "Sweet Mother of God," she whispered, collapsing into a chair. "Our HOA isn't just being robbed. We're actively laundering drug cartel money through our landscaping budget." The scope was breathtaking. Harold's analysis showed approximately $340,000 in suspicious payments over 18 months, but the Mexican source funding suggested the actual trafficking operation involved tens of millions. The most chilling discovery came when Rita cross-referenced HOA payment dates with local drug bust reports from newspaper archives. 3 major Austin drug seizures over the past year had occurred within 2 weeks of significant HOA expenditures. The correlation was too precise to be coincidental. "We're not dealing with neighborhood corruption," I said, the full weight settling on my shoulders. "We've stumbled into evidence of a major drug trafficking network hiding behind suburban bureaucracy." My hands were shaking as I studied the documentation. What started as a fight over my stolen ATV had uncovered a criminal conspiracy that could bring down an entire drug trafficking organization. But with that realization came sobering understanding of exactly how dangerous the Hutchinson family really was. People willing to launder millions in cartel money don't send strongly worded letters when threatened. They eliminate problems permanently. Harold carefully organized the evidence into manila folders. "We need Agent Rodriguez to see this immediately," he said quietly. "And we need to assume we're now targets of a very sophisticated criminal organization." As I drove home with copies locked in my glove compartment, I realized my comfortable suburban life had just ended forever. Tomorrow I'd hand federal agents documentation that could trigger the largest drug investigation in Austin's recent history. But tonight, sitting in my empty workshop surrounded by the familiar smell of sawdust and WD-40, I understood that the Hutchinson family would do absolutely anything to protect their multi-million-dollar criminal empire, including eliminating one annoying widower who'd asked too many questions about his stolen ATV. Friday morning, I called Agent Rodriguez with shaking hands and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. 20 minutes later, she was in my kitchen studying Harold's financial evidence with surgical focus. "Mr. Webb," she said, spreading documents across my breakfast table, "you've handed us the missing piece of a federal investigation stalled for 8 months. This connects Rick Hutchinson to a cartel operation we've been tracking from El Paso to Houston. Within 6 hours, my suburban home became an impromptu federal command center. Agent Rodriguez assembled the team: forensic accountant Jennifer Chen, Harold's daughter, paralegal Carlos Mendez, specializing in RICO cases, and a tech specialist who could hack a toaster. Fresh coffee mixed with ozone scent from multiple laptops as federal agents turned my dining room into mission control. "Here's what we're dealing with," Rodriguez explained, using my kitchen whiteboard. "Rick runs drugs from Mexico through corrupt doctors. Cash gets laundered through shell companies, then cleaned through your HOA's inflated contracts. Jennifer had already started building a prosecutorial timeline. Based on your documentation, we're looking at approximately $2.3 million laundered over 3 years through this single HOA," she said, fingers flying across spreadsheets. "But Mexican sources suggest the overall operation involves tens of millions." Carlos pulled out a thick binder of federal statutes. "Under RICO, we can prosecute the entire criminal organization: money laundering, drug trafficking, racketeering charges carrying 20-year minimum sentences." But legal education came with sobering warnings about witness protection. Rodriguez made clear that people laundering cartel money don't hesitate to eliminate threats. "We're arranging protective surveillance," she said, installing a panic button app on my phone. "Your daughters in Dallas are being relocated to a safe house until arrests." The next 72 hours blurred into evidence gathering. Harold organized 3 years of financial records into color-coded timelines showing when dirty money flowed through our neighborhood association. Rita conducted reconnaissance coffee mornings with neighbors, documenting systematic intimidation beyond my ATV theft. Mrs. Patterson had been fined $500 for excessive holiday decorations, identical to ones Brenda praised on social media. The Johnsons received $300 in bogus violations after questioning tripled pool maintenance costs. Meanwhile, the tech specialist monitored electronic communications around the Hutchinson house. Results were disturbing. "They know you're investigating," he showed me intercepted text messages. "Brenda's coordinating with someone called El Jefe about eliminating the problem. We're talking potential violence, not just legal threats." Rodriguez immediately escalated security protocols. Federal marshals began drive-by surveillance every 2 hours. Motion sensors were installed throughout my property. My workshop got equipped with enough security equipment to protect a federal courthouse. Strangely, everything looked normal from outside. Neighbors walked dogs. Overpriced lawn crews showed up twice weekly. Brenda drove by in her Mercedes, conducting surveillance like nothing changed. But everything had changed. Jennifer's analysis uncovered bank records showing Rick's shell companies receiving wire transfers from known cartel networks. Carlos identified RICO predicate acts stretching back 5 years. The tech specialist documented communications between Rick and figures on federal watch lists. "We have enough evidence to arrest the entire Hutchinson family right now," Rodriguez told me during Wednesday evening briefing. "But we want to coordinate with DEA operations in Houston and El Paso to take down the entire network simultaneously." Timeline was set: coordinated federal raids during the annual Pinewood Estates Community Barbecue in 72 hours. Maximum public exposure, witnesses, humiliation for people who'd spent years thinking they were untouchable. "The barbecue provides perfect cover," Rodriguez explained, showing surveillance photos. 40-plus neighbors, local news coverage, city council members. When we arrest them in front of the entire neighborhood, it sends a message that no one's above federal law. Thursday night, I sat in my workshop surrounded by familiar sawdust and machine oil smells, cleaning tools I might never see again. Rodriguez had made clear that witness protection was possible if the cartel retaliated. Jennifer knocked around 10 p.m., carrying a manila envelope heavy with finality. "This is everything," she said, handing me complete evidence copies. Bank records, corporate filings, communication intercepts, financial analysis, everything needed to convict them under federal racketeering statutes. The documentation was staggering. 247 pages showing how Rick used our suburban HOA to launder approximately $2.3 million in drug money over 3 years. More importantly, it connected our neighborhood to a cartel operation flooding Texas with fentanyl. Saturday's barbecue would be more than arrests. It would be justice for every intimidated neighbor, every family destroyed by Rick's drugs, every person told they were powerless against corrupt authority. The Hutchinson family had spent years believing they were untouchable. In 48 hours, they'd discover exactly how wrong they were. The Hutchinson family's panic started showing exactly 72 hours before the barbecue, like someone had lit a fuse slowly burning toward an explosion. It began with Brenda calling an emergency HOA meeting Thursday night. The first time in 3 years she'd scheduled anything without advance notice. The community center reeked of disinfectant and desperation as confused neighbors filed in. "We need to address serious security concerns," Brenda announced, her composure showing hairline cracks. Her hands shook as she shuffled papers, her purse clutched like armor. She launched into rambling speech about outside agitators and threats to property values, clearly talking about federal investigators. The woman who'd terrorized neighbors was now terrified herself. "I'm proposing banning all security cameras on private property," she continued, voice getting shriller. "These devices violate privacy and create suspicion." The motion died instantly. 34 neighbors voted against, 13 in favor. Her support base crumbled. Even the Hendersons voted against the ban. Harold raised his hand. "Mrs. Hutchinson, why have landscaping costs increased 300% while landscaping deteriorated?" Dead silence except for rattling air conditioning. You could hear Brenda's blood pressure spiking as her shell game was questioned publicly. "Those are complex administrative matters," she stammered, gathering papers. "This meeting is adjourned." Real desperation showed Friday morning when Rick returned early from Mexico. I watched a black Escalade pull into their driveway, followed by 2 men who weren't insurance salesmen. The tech specialist fed me real-time updates through encrypted messages. Intercepts were increasingly frantic. "Package delivery compromised. El Jefe wants full extraction by Sunday. Local heat too intense. Liquidate assets and relocate operation." Agent Rodriguez called emergency briefing Friday evening, calm demeanor replaced by tactical urgency. "They're planning to run. Rick's cartel contacts are ordering immediate evacuation before federal warrants." But running isn't easy after building a money laundering empire around suburban HOA. Rick had assets and networks that couldn't be abandoned overnight without triggering federal investigations. "They're liquidating everything," Jennifer reported, laptop showing real-time transfers. "Rick's moving money between shell companies, trying to get cash offshore before we freeze accounts." Federal investigators had been watching those accounts for weeks. Every transfer was documented as additional evidence. Saturday morning brought brazen desperation. 3 men in expensive suits knocked on my door, smiles as fake as Rick's pharmaceutical company. "Mr. Webb, we represent business interests preferring to resolve this privately," the lead guy said with polite menace. "Our clients offer substantial compensation for your discretion." I kept my hand near the panic button while studying these thugs. Bulges under their jackets weren't well concealed. "Gentlemen, I think you have me confused with someone who gives a damn about your client's problems." Their smiles disappeared. "Some problems have permanent solutions. We'd hate for you to become one." "Interesting," I said, showing them the recording app running since they knocked. "Threatening federal witnesses carries 10 years minimum." They left without another word, but the lead guy photographed my house number. Rodriguez had federal marshals surrounding my property within 20 minutes. "They're getting desperate," she explained, reviewing audio. "Desperate people make mistakes, and mistakes give us additional charges." Saturday afternoon brought news that Rick was caught at Austin Airport, trying to board a private jet to Nicaragua, with $200,000 cash and false documents. Federal agents arrested him on the tarmac, adding flight risk and passport fraud charges. But Brenda and Kaylee were still at large, still planning to attend Sunday's barbecue. Either they didn't know Rick was arrested, or they were planning something requiring federal tactical response. We're treating tomorrow as high-risk operation, Rodriguez told me during final briefing. Full tactical support, medical standby, media coordination. If they're planning violence, we're ready. That night, I sat in my workshop surrounded by familiar sawdust and WD-40 smells, thinking about Sarah. She'd bought me that ATV because she wanted me to keep living after she was gone. I doubted she'd imagined it would lead to bringing down a drug cartel, but she'd always said I was stubborn enough to take on the world when I believed in something. Tomorrow, Brenda would discover that stealing from the wrong widower could expose criminal conspiracies worth millions. And Kaylee would learn that claiming to be untouchable only works until federal agents show up with handcuffs. The barbecue was going to be very interesting. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of oppressive Texas heat that makes everything shimmer like a mirage, but the real illusion was how normal everything looked while federal agents prepared to execute the largest drug bust in Austin's suburban history. I woke up at 5 a.m. to find Agent Rodriguez drinking coffee in my kitchen, her tactical vest hanging over my breakfast chair like some surreal piece of suburban armor. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with gun oil and the ozone scent of encrypted radio equipment created an oddly comforting atmosphere for the calm before the storm. Final briefing in 30 minutes, she said, checking her watch with the precision of someone who'd coordinated dozens of federal raids. 37 agents from DEA, FBI, and IRS are already positioned throughout the neighborhood. This is the culmination of an 8-month investigation that extends from here to El Paso. The coordination was staggering in its complexity. Rodriguez showed me surveillance photos of agents disguised as joggers, dog walkers, and utility workers who'd been infiltrating the neighborhood since dawn. Federal communications vans were parked 3 blocks away, monitoring every electronic signal around the Hutchinson house. Brenda and Kaylee have no idea Rick was arrested yesterday, Rodriguez explained, adjusting her earpiece. They're still planning to attend the barbecue, probably hoping to maintain appearances while planning their escape. The community barbecue setup was already underway in Pinewood Park, with neighbors arranging folding tables and portable grills. Like this was just another suburban weekend gathering. The irony was perfect. A money laundering operation would be exposed at an event funded by the very HOA fees they'd been stealing. Harold and Rita arrived at my house around 8 a.m., both wearing the nervous energy of people about to witness justice after years of systematic abuse. Harold carried a manila folder containing the final evidence compilation, 247 pages documenting how Rick Hutchinson had laundered $2.3 million through our neighborhood association. "I've been an accountant for 43 years, Harold said, adjusting his glasses nervously, "and I've never seen financial corruption this sophisticated get exposed this completely. Today's going to be very satisfying." Rita was chain-smoking like a chimney, her stress levels understandably high considering she'd been the first person brave enough to question Brenda's financial irregularities. "I keep thinking about all the neighbors who were too scared to speak up," she said, exhaling smoke into the morning air. "Today, everyone's going to see that bullies aren't invincible." Agent Rodriguez's radio crackled with updates every few minutes as federal teams reported their positions. Unit 7 in position at Oak Street intersection. Communications team has full electronic surveillance online. Tactical response team standing by 3 blocks south. The coordination reminded me of military operations I'd seen in movies, except this was happening in our quiet suburban neighborhood, where the biggest previous excitement had been Mrs. Patterson's Halloween decorations controversy. By 10 a.m., 43 of the 47 neighborhood families had confirmed attendance at the barbecue. Local news crews were setting up, having been tipped off about a major community announcement without knowing they were about to witness federal arrests. City Council members Jake Morrison and Patricia Williams had arrived early, along with County Commissioner David Chen, Harold's nephew, it turned out. The political presence would ensure maximum publicity when the arrests happened. "Perfect witness coverage," Agent Rodriguez noted, reviewing the crowd through high-powered binoculars. "When we arrest them in front of local officials and news cameras, it sends a message that federal law applies to everyone, regardless of their perceived community status." The most surreal part was watching Brenda arrive at 11:30, dressed in a flowing summer dress and carrying her usual oversized purse, acting like she was attending a garden party instead of her own downfall. She worked the crowd with fake smiles and air kisses, completely oblivious to the federal agents positioned throughout the park. Kaylee showed up 20 minutes later with 2 friends, wearing sunglasses and attitude like she was auditioning for a reality show about entitled suburban brats. She'd apparently learned nothing from Jake Morrison's arrest or her father's airport detention, or maybe she genuinely believed the family's untouchable status would protect her from federal charges. Agent Rodriguez checked her watch and spoke quietly into her radio. All units, targets are in position. Executing arrest warrants in 15 minutes during the community announcement portion. The barbecue proceeded normally for the first hour, neighbors chatting about lawn care, kids running around screaming about pool plans, elderly residents complaining about property taxes. The normalcy was almost hypnotic until you remembered that 3 federal agencies were about to expose a multi-million-dollar drug operation hiding behind suburban bureaucracy. Harold had been designated to make the community announcement that would serve as the signal for federal agents to move in. His hands shook slightly as he approached the microphone set up near the main pavilion, but his voice was steady when he began speaking. Neighbors, we've gathered today to address serious concerns about financial irregularities in our HOA management, Harold announced, his accountant's precision cutting through the humid air like a blade. After months of investigation, we've discovered evidence of systematic theft and money laundering that extends far beyond simple embezzlement. The crowd's chatter died instantly. Brenda's face went pale as Harold continued outlining the evidence against her family's criminal enterprise. Kaylee started looking around nervously, finally sensing that something was very wrong. These financial crimes are connected to drug trafficking operations that have used our neighborhood association to launder millions of dollars in illegal proceeds, Harold continued, his voice gaining strength with each revelation. Today, federal authorities will be executing arrest warrants for the individuals responsible. That's when Agent Rodriguez stepped out from behind the pavilion, her badge clearly visible, followed by 36 other federal agents emerging from positions throughout the park like some perfectly choreographed law enforcement ballet. Brenda Hutchinson, Kaylee Hutchinson, you're under arrest for money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent park. The next few minutes would be burned into every neighbor's memory forever, the sound of handcuffs clicking shut, news cameras capturing everything, and 2 people who'd terrorized an entire neighborhood finally facing federal justice. But the best part was watching Brenda's perfect suburban facade crumble completely, as she realized her untouchable status meant absolutely nothing to federal agents with arrest warrants. Justice was about to be served at a community barbecue with a side of very public humiliation. The moment Agent Rodriguez stepped into view with her badge gleaming in the Texas sun, the entire barbecue crowd went dead silent except for the distant hum of news helicopters that had appeared overhead like mechanical vultures sensing a story. Brenda's reaction was pure theater. Her face cycled through confusion, denial, and raw panic in about 3 seconds before settling on indignant rage. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked, her perfectly modulated HOA president voice cracking like thin ice. "You can't arrest me at a community event. I have rights." "Yes, ma'am, you do," Agent Rodriguez replied with professional calm, pulling out handcuffs that caught the sunlight like jewelry. "You have the right to remain silent, which I'd recommend using right about now." But Brenda wasn't going quietly. "This is harassment, political persecution. My husband is a respected pharmaceutical executive." She clutched her oversized purse like a shield, while 37 federal agents formed a perimeter around the pavilion. "Your husband was arrested yesterday at the airport trying to flee to Nicaragua with $200,000 cash and false documents," Rodriguez announced loud enough for the news cameras to catch every word. "He's currently in federal custody facing drug trafficking and money laundering charges." The crowd's collective gasp was audible over the helicopter rotors. Mrs. Patterson from Oak Street actually dropped her paper plate of potato salad, the sound of disposable dinnerware hitting concrete somehow perfectly punctuating the moment. Kaylee's response was even more dramatic than her mother's. "You can't do this to us," she screamed, backing away from approaching agents like a cornered animal. "My family runs this place. We're untouchable. You don't know who you're messing with." That's when Agent Rodriguez delivered the line that would be replayed on local news for weeks. "Miss Hutchinson, your family has been running a drug trafficking operation disguised as HOA management. The only thing you're touching now is federal prison time." City Councilman Jake Morrison, no relation to Kaylee's arrested boyfriend, stepped forward with his phone recording everything. "Agent Rodriguez, can you explain to our community what these arrests are about?" "Certainly, Councilman. The Hutchinson family has been using Pinewood Estates HOA to launder approximately $2.3 million in drug trafficking proceeds over 3 years. They inflated maintenance contracts, created phantom expenses, and used shell companies to wash money from Mexican cartel operations." The crowd erupted in angry murmurs as neighbors realized their monthly HOA dues had been funding a criminal enterprise. Mr. Henderson, who'd received discounted fees for supporting Brenda, Looked like he wanted to crawl under a picnic table and disappear. Every bogus fine, every inflated contract, every mysterious administrative fee was part of a money laundering scheme that connected your neighborhood to a network responsible for distributing fentanyl across Texas, Rodriguez continued, her voice cutting through the chaos with prosecutorial precision. Harold stepped up to the microphone, his moment of vindication finally arriving after months of being dismissed as a paranoid old man. Neighbors, the evidence is overwhelming. Bank records, corporate filings, communication intercepts, everything needed to prove the Hutchinson family turned our community association into a front for organized crime. Brenda made one last desperate play for sympathy. These accusations are fabricated. Mr. Webb has been harassing us for months, filing false reports because we enforced community standards on his illegal vehicle. I'd been standing quietly near the pavilion, but that accusation demanded a response. Agent Rodriguez nodded for me to approach the microphone. "Mrs. Hutchinson," I said, my voice carrying across the silent crowd, "your daughter stole my ATV because your family thought they were above the law. But that theft led to discovering your husband's drug trafficking operation and your money laundering scheme." The news cameras swung toward me as I continued. "For 2 years, you terrorized neighbors with bogus fines while stealing from our HOA to wash drug money. You thought being HOA president made you untouchable." I paused, looking directly at Brenda as federal agents moved closer with handcuffs ready. "Today, you're finding out that federal law doesn't care about your neighborhood politics." That's when Kaylee completely lost control. "You destroyed my family, you psycho!" she screamed, lunging toward me before being intercepted by 2 agents who handled her struggling form with professional efficiency. "We were somebody!" "You're nobody." Agent Rodriguez's response was ice cold. "Miss Hutchinson, your family destroyed themselves. Mr. Webb simply refused to be your victim." The handcuffs clicked shut with metallic finality as both women were read their rights. The sound echoed across the park, captured by multiple news cameras and cell phones held by neighbors who finally understood the scope of corruption that had been hidden in plain sight. "Brenda Hutchinson, you're charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering, racketeering under the RICO Act, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances," Rodriguez announced. "Kaylee Hutchinson, you're charged with theft, vandalism, criminal threats, and conspiracy to commit money laundering." As federal agents led them toward waiting vehicles, Brenda made one final attempt at maintaining her dignity. "This is a mistake that will be corrected," she called over her shoulder. "Our lawyers will have us released by tomorrow." Agent Rodriguez's smile was pure professional satisfaction. "Ma'am, your assets have been frozen under federal forfeiture laws. Your lawyers are about to become very expensive, and you won't be paying them with drug money." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the white Mercedes and black Escalade were loaded onto federal impound trucks. Harold stepped back to the microphone for the final announcement. "Neighbors, today marks the end of 3 years of systematic theft and intimidation. Our HOA will be placed under federal oversight pending asset recovery, but we're finally free from the Hutchinson family's criminal enterprise." As the federal vehicles disappeared down our quiet suburban street, taking Brenda and Kaylee toward downtown detention facilities, the remaining neighbors began talking in amazed whispers about how a simple ATV theft had exposed the biggest money laundering operation in Austin's suburban history. But the best part was watching Mrs. Patterson approach Harold with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was so tired of being afraid in my own neighborhood." That's when I realized this wasn't just about catching criminals. It was about proving that ordinary people can fight back against corruption when they're willing to stand together and document the truth. The barbecue continued, but now it felt like a victory celebration. 6 months after that unforgettable barbecue, I'm sitting in my workshop on a crisp October morning, the smell of cedar shavings and fresh coffee mixing with the satisfaction of justice served cold. The empty lot where the Hutchinson house once stood has been transformed into a community garden that blooms with vegetables and the kind of neighborly cooperation we never had under Brenda's reign of terror. The legal outcomes exceeded even Agent Rodriguez's wildest prosecutorial dreams. Rick Hutchinson received 15 years in federal prison for drug trafficking and money laundering. His lawyer's arguments about legitimate pharmaceutical consulting fell flat when prosecutors showed the jury millions in cartel money flowing through our suburban HOA like a financial sewer system. Brenda got 8 years for conspiracy and racketeering, her perfect suburban facade crumbling during a trial that made national news. The judge wasn't sympathetic to her claims about being a dedicated community volunteer when evidence showed she'd terrorized neighbors while stealing their money to wash drug profits. Kaylee received 3 years in state prison for theft and criminal threats, though she'll likely serve 18 months with good behavior. Her untouchable attitude didn't survive 1 week in county lockup. Apparently, prison inmates aren't impressed by HOA presidency credentials. Jake Morrison, the boyfriend who started this whole chain reaction, got 12 years federal time, but testified against 17 other cartel associates in exchange for witness protection. His cooperation helped dismantle drug networks from El Paso to Houston, making our little neighborhood investigation part of the largest regional trafficking bust in DEA history. The financial recovery was equally satisfying. Federal asset forfeiture recovered $312,000 from Hutchinson accounts, plus another $180,000 from seized vehicles and properties. Every stolen penny came back to the HOA with interest, along with punitive damages covering all legal fees for harassed neighbors. Our monthly HOA dues dropped from Brenda's inflated $180 to a reasonable $95 under legitimate management. Turns out, running a neighborhood association honestly is remarkably affordable when you're not washing cartel money through landscaping contracts. Harold Chen became treasurer with unanimous approval. Nobody questioned his qualifications after he'd exposed a multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme using nothing but spreadsheets and righteous indignation. Rita Gonzalez got elected president on a platform of never again, implementing quarterly public audits and monthly budget meetings where every expense gets scrutinized like evidence in a federal trial. The demolished Hutchinson house became Sarah's Trails Memorial Garden, honoring my late wife while providing fresh vegetables and a gathering place for weekend coffee mornings that actually bring neighbors together. The irony is perfect. The lot where corruption once festered now grows tomatoes and community spirit in equal measure. My personal healing surprised everyone, including myself. The ATV that Kaylee tried to steal now leads weekly trail rides that have become neighborhood tradition. Every Saturday morning, a dozen neighbors meet in my driveway for coffee and rides through Texas Hill Country, the sound of engines and laughter replacing Brenda's toxic intimidation campaigns. Property values increased 12% after news coverage attracted buyers seeking authentic community. Apparently, people will pay extra to live somewhere that proved corruption doesn't win. The waiting list for Pinewood Estates homes now stretches 6 months, with realtors specifically mentioning our proven resistance to HOA abuse as a selling point. But the real victory is watching Mrs. Patterson tend tomatoes in Sarah's garden while chatting with Harold about his grandchildren. For 3 years, Brenda's systematic harassment had isolated neighbors from each other. Now people actually know each other's names and help with everything from lawn care to emergency babysitting. The case became a national cautionary tale about HOA corruption, inspiring new Texas legislation requiring enhanced financial reporting for all homeowner associations. Property management companies now implement oversight protocols specifically designed to prevent Hutchinson-style theft. And FBI financial crimes schools teach our case as an example of citizen investigation exposing sophisticated criminal enterprises. Last weekend, a young family moved into the renovated house across the street. Their 8-year-old daughter ran over to ask about vegetables growing where the mean lady's house used to be. Apparently, neighborhood legend has already immortalized Brenda's downfall in kid-friendly terms. "My wife grew tomatoes just like these," I told her, handing over a sun-warmed cherry tomato. She would have loved knowing that good things grow where bad things used to happen. The smell of rich soil and growing plants filled the morning air as neighbors gathered for coffee. Harold sharing calculations about money saved under honest management, Rita updating everyone about other Texas HOAs requesting help investigating suspicious finances. But mostly, we just enjoyed being neighbors who could trust each other again. The ATV sits in my driveway exactly where this whole adventure started. No longer a source of conflict, but a symbol of what happens when ordinary people refuse to accept corruption as normal. Sarah's workshop photo still shows her grinning and mud-splattered, thumbs up like she's approving the fight that honored her memory. Here's what I learned. Sometimes standing up to petty bullies exposes massive crimes. Sometimes one stolen ATV can bring down an entire criminal empire. And sometimes the best revenge is building something better where corruption used to flourish. Which brings me to my next case. Last week, I got a letter from Oregon where an HOA president is demanding $500 monthly special assessments with zero explanation. The financial patterns sound remarkably familiar, and Agent Rodriguez thinks we might have another money laundering investigation brewing in the Pacific Northwest. Looks like this widower's fight for justice is just getting started. If you've survived your own HOA nightmare, drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and some of you might be sitting on evidence of serious crimes without realizing it. Check your HOA financial reports, document everything, and remember that bullies always have the biggest secrets to hide. And smash that subscribe button for HOA stories, because next week we're heading to Oregon, where another corrupt board is about to learn that targeting the wrong neighbor can expose secrets worth millions. Remember, corruption counts on your silence. Don't give them that power.